Hello, my name is Damon and I am a climate scientist. I study predictions of global warming using mathematical models of the climate system. And as mind-numbing as I know thousands of lines of programming code is, I have to say that it always feels a little bit magical to be able to produce something that looks even a little bit like the real world, using a computer, a set of mathematical relationships, and some input data. In my research, I use climate models as a tool to understand just how far we are currently pushing our climate envelope, what level of emissions are consistent with different climate targets, and what climate damages are avoidable by decreasing our emissions. But when I confess what I do to an interested stranger, the question so often comes down to something like, so, are we all doomed? And this is actually a fair question. Global warming is frightening, and there is certainly the possibility of many different shades of doom. But fundamentally, I am optimistic that we can solve this problem if we set our minds to. And to use an overused cliche, I think that it matters whether we decide that the global warming glass is half full or half empty. One of the recent conclusions of my research is that we've probably used up about half of the total allowable emissions that we are allowed to emit if we want to keep global temperatures below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Since the 1800s, global temperature have increased by a bit less than a degree, and this is in response to the 2 trillion tons of carbon dioxide that we've put into the atmosphere. And so if we can emit no more than this much again, we stand a good chance of staying below the 2-degree warming target that most of the world has agreed that represents an achievable and maybe even acceptable level of climate warming. There is then a fair amount of choice still left to us as to how and indeed if we choose to emit this remaining emissions budget. Of course, there is also room to despair. As a Canadian, I despair a little bit every time I listen to our government speak about its aspirations for Canada's oil industry. The lack of coordinated climate action at the international level is consistently frustrating, and I am both aware and ashamed of the recent role that Canada has played as an obstructor of international progress. And I am constantly astonished and infuriated by the strength and persistence of the climate denial movement. But these are all human problems, reflecting short-term political or economic priorities, and human priorities can change quickly. There is also room to be afraid about the future of our planet. At 1 degree of global temperature change, we are already starting to see the effects of global warming. Patterns of extreme weather are beginning to change as a warming climate provides more energy and moisture to fuel already powerful storms. Extremely hot summers will become the norm, rather than the exception, with consequent increases in the frequency of heat waves. There are many meters worth of sea level stored in the ice of Greenland and Antarctica, and we still don't really know how much of the sea level rise will actually occur. And the oceans will continue to soak up about 1/3 of all the carbon dioxide we put into the atmosphere, slowing the rate of global warming, but at the cost of increased ocean acidity. As scientists, we hope that keeping global warming temperatures to below 2 degrees will avoid the worst and most dangerous of these impacts, that there will be impacts associated with this additional degree of warming. And in truth, nobody is really sure just how fast these impacts will emerge and how dangerous they will be. I do know enough to be genuinely frightened of a world in which we utterly fail to curb our greenhouse gas emissions, a world in which we rush to extract as much oil and gas as we possibly can, driving global temperatures to increase by 5 degrees or more. And make no mistake, this is the path that the world is currently on. But what about the 2-degree world? A 2-degree world may be tolerable, but will not be without loss. Coral reef ecosystems may be severely compromised by the combination of warming ocean temperatures and increased ocean acidity. Heat waves and extreme weather events will inevitably claim more lives than they do today. Many species will not be able to adapt fast enough to warming temperatures, and some may not survive. And though it may sound trite by comparison here in southern Canada, we probably won't be able to skate on the canal in the winter, or if you to build outdoor skating rinks anywhere without refrigeration technologies. I'm a father, and sometimes I do despair for what we've done to our children's future. But if we give in to despair, I do think that we stop trying, or we do something stupid. And there is certainly ample capacity for human stupidity in how we might choose to respond to the climate problem. And so given despair is the alternative, I have to think that hope is a better choice. But I also think that there is still hope of averting many of the worst potential impacts of global warming. One of the most important things that I've learned from my research over the past decade or so is that very little about the climate system is predetermined. The climate will change in proportion to how much we push it to change, and most evidence suggests that it will respond approximately linearly to total carbon dioxide emissions. This means that each emission of carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere has about the same effect, regardless of how quickly or when it is emitted. It also means that if we could stop emitting carbon dioxide tomorrow, there would be surprisingly little additional warming. Or, by association, if we could slow the rate of our emissions, the rate of warming would quickly follow. And so the future of the climate system does depend entirely on our imagination, our will, and our ability to define a new path with respect to our greenhouse gas emissions. But while the climate response to carbon dioxide emissions may be a reasonably linear problem, the dynamics of human societies are not. And this is hopeful to me because it means we'll have the potential to change rapidly and non-linearly if we decide that it's a priority. Of course, global warming presents an enormous challenge. We need to completely transform our global energy system away from fossil fuels and ultimately eliminate all emissions of carbon dioxide. But I have to continue to believe that this change is possible, and that we will not collectively decide to ignore the clear warnings of real danger for our and our children's future. Because given what power any of us have to influence the path of world events, I do want to be able to tell my children's children that we did everything we could to avert an actual climate catastrophe. Thank you.